Did you know that in the United States, a median income buyer can today afford a home nearly $30,000 more expensive than they could just 1 year ago? Sounds like great news, right? And in some ways, it really is. But there's an important detail that changes everything. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in this video. Welcome! If you follow the American real estate market, whether because you live in the U.S., have investments there, or simply love understanding economics, this content was made for you. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into a new study from Zillow, one of the largest real estate platforms in the United States, which brought some very revealing data about Americans' purchasing power in the housing market. We'll cover everything: what changed, why it changed, which cities gained the most, and why this good news still isn't enough for many people to actually achieve the dream of home ownership. Stay until the end, because the historical context numbers are jaw-dropping. Let's get into it. The Zillow study revealed the following. An American family with median income, currently around $86,300 per year, that has enough money for a 20% down payment can now buy a home worth up to $331,483. That's an increase of $300 compared to last year, when that same buyer profile could afford a maximum of $120. In other words, over 12 months, purchasing power went up by more than $30,000. Significant, isn't it? But before anything else, it's important to understand what Zillow means by can afford, because this isn't just about having money in your pocket. The criterion used is this: the monthly mortgage payment, including insurance and property taxes, needs to represent less than 30% of the household's gross monthly income. That's the classic benchmark for financial health in the American market. When housing costs exceed 30% of income, a family starts entering a financially risky zone. So when Zillow says a family can afford a $331,000 home, it's saying that the monthly payments on that property won't take up more than 30% of that family's income. Make sense? And what explains that $30,000 jump? Basically, two things: the decline in mortgage interest rates and a modest increase in wages. The average 30-year mortgage rate fell from 6.96% per year in January 2025 to around 6.1% last month. Seems small? It's not. That difference of nearly 1 percentage point has a massive impact on monthly payments, and therefore on the total a person can borrow. According to Zillow, the typical monthly mortgage payment today is 4% lower than it was a year ago, even with home prices still elevated. That's the power of interest rates. When they fall, buyers can breathe. Now, here comes the cold water. The median American buyer can today afford $331,000. Great. But what's the median price of a single-family home in the United States? According to the National Association of Realtors, the NAR, the median price in January was $300. See the gap? The median income buyer can afford $331,000. The median home costs $400. There's a difference of nearly $70 between what the typical American can pay and what the market is charging. And there's more. To qualify for a mortgage on a home at that median price, given January's interest rate of 6.19%, a buyer would need an annual income of $94,032. The American median income is $86,300, meaning someone with the median income still earns less than what's needed to buy the median home. It's a frustrating contradiction in the market. The median American cannot afford the median home. Now, to put things in a positive perspective, a year ago, when rates were at 7.04% and the median home price was $398, $100, a buyer needed an income of $102 $96 to qualify. That minimum required income has dropped from $102 to $94,000. That's progress. Slow, but real. Zillow senior economist Kara Ung sums it up well. A gain of more than $30 in purchasing power is meaningful for families who have been right on the edge. It can be the difference between actually having choices or taking the first available option. To understand how the market got here, we need to take a step back and look at the history of the last several years. And that context is startling. Between 2000 and 2024, median American per capita income grew by roughly 155%. Over that same period, median home prices rose by 207%, according to a recent study from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. In other words, homes got much more expensive than people got richer. That's the structural root of the housing affordability problem in the U.S. Then came the pandemic. Between 2019 and 2024, home prices rose nearly 48%, while wages grew just 22%. The imbalance deepened, and then came the interest rate shock. Mortgage rates, which were below 3% in mid-2021, a historic and extraordinary level, shot up to nearly 8% in October 2023. That was the worst moment for American buyers in recent memory. In October 2023, at the peak of the crisis, the median buyer could afford a home worth just $272. That means, from the crisis peak to today, purchasing power has climbed nearly $60. That's a lot. But the market went from a terrible situation to a difficult one, which is not the same thing as a good one. When we look at Harvard University's data on the American housing market, we see that the median price of a single-family home reached 5 times the median annual income in 2024, nearly a historic record. In the 1990s, that ratio was 2 times. In 2019, before the pandemic, it was 1 times. Today, it's 5 times. Now here's something I find fascinating. The impact of falling interest rates isn't the same everywhere in the country. And curiously, the most expensive cities saw the biggest gains in purchasing power. Why? Because when rates fall, the effect is proportional to the size of the debt. A $1 million home is far more sensitive to interest rate changes than a $200 home. Look at the numbers. San Jose, California. Buyers gained nearly $74 more in purchasing power. The biggest gain among major American cities. San Francisco, a gain of $56,115. Washington, D.C., a gain of $48,881. San Diego, $46,505 more in purchasing power. Boston, $46,390 in extra buying capacity. In other words, high-income buyers in the most expensive cities were the biggest beneficiaries of falling rates. Yet another sign that the American housing crisis has an embedded dimension of inequality. Another positive data point from the study: the number of homes affordable to a median-income family increased by roughly 300 units compared to last year, reaching approximately 447 listed properties in January. Progress, but still a small universe given the pent-up demand from buyers. Here's one of the most counterintuitive points in this entire debate. The improvement in affordability could actually make things worse in the long run. How so? Simple. When more families gain purchasing power, more people enter the market as buyers. If the supply of homes doesn't keep up with that surge in demand, what happens? Prices go up. NAR chief economist Lawrence Yun warned precisely about this. If housing supply doesn't increase, these newly empowered buyers may simply push home prices higher, wiping out the very affordability gains that just appeared. It's like a queue. If more people join the line without more windows being opened, everyone waits longer, or pays more for the privilege of cutting ahead. And there's another factor that could supercharge that demand: If rates fall another full percentage point from here, the NAR estimates that 5 million new families would become able to purchase a home, including 6 million renters who could become first-time buyers. That would be a massive shift in the market. That's why any analysis of the American real estate market has to account for both sides, demand and supply. And supply, historically, doesn't keep up. There's a dimension of this debate that rarely makes the economic headlines, but that is absolutely fundamental. Who are the people being left out of this market? The data is revealing. In the fourth quarter of 2025, the homeownership rate among white Americans was 75%. 1%. Among Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, 63%. 1%. Among Hispanic Americans, 48%. 7%. Among Black Americans, 44%. 2%. And that inequality is growing. Among adults under 44, Black Americans are half as likely to own a home compared to white Americans of the same age group. Mortgage denial rates follow the same pattern. 16, 5% denial rate for white applicants, 27, 1% for Black applicants, 22% for Hispanic applicants. In other words, on top of lower wages, many of these communities face additional barriers within the financial system itself. And there's one more group missing from the positive headlines: renters. To buy a typical American home today, you need to earn more than $110,000 per year. While to afford a typical rent, you only need around $64,430. That 73% gap between the cost of buying and the cost of renting is the largest ever recorded. And it explains why so many Americans who want to buy a home end up stuck in the rental market, which, by the way, is also getting more expensive. So, bringing it all together, what's the big picture? The American housing market is improving, but slowly. Falling interest rates and modest income growth have given the median buyer $30,002 more in purchasing power, the biggest jump since 2022. That's real, and it matters. But the distance between what the typical American can afford and what the market charges is still nearly $70. Homes have gotten more expensive faster than people have gotten richer. Interest rates are still well above their historic lows, and any improvement in demand without an equivalent increase in supply could result in even more upward pressure on prices. The American dream of homeownership hasn't disappeared, but it has become more expensive, more distant, and more unequal than it was for the previous generation. If you want to keep following analysis on economics, real estate, and personal finance, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and let me know in the comments. Are you trying to buy property in the U.S., or are you sitting this market out for now? Your experience adds so much to this conversation. See you in the next one.